Okay, I'd like you all to welcome Charlie Sheaf from the Monadnock Woodturners group, and really pleased to have you here. And I see you brought three other members of this group. Mm-hmm. And Charlie used to teach at Keene State College, or still does part-time, but we're delighted to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as Dave said, Charlie Sheaf, and it's kind of interesting. This is really the first time I've been introduced as someone who used to teach at Keene State. I retired last May, June, whatever, at the end of last year. I've been there for 34 years, and if you're not familiar with the program at Keene State, we have 17 lathes in the shop there, and just did an absolute ton of turning. People ask me every once in a while, how long have you been turning anyway? And as I was packing stuff up to come up here today, I grabbed my mallet. I hate to admit it, but I turned this 51 years ago. When I was 16 years old, did a little turning there. So how long have I been turning? Probably too long, as it goes. Because I taught at the college, basically I was always interested in things that were different. I was up here a year or so ago, and we did the lost wood process. And because of dealing with the students and the students' interest, I found that the more things I could introduce to them to show them, the more interest you garner. It's like even in a group like this, you know, some people like turning bowls, some people may like doing spindle turning, whatever. We all like various different things, or pens, or anything like that. And that's kind of how I ended up with the whole thing about the inside-out turning, which we're going to talk about today. The project that I'm shooting for is going to be this wine bottle, and we can put a wine goblet inside it, although we wouldn't have to. So let me just give you the 30-second sort of intro to inside-out turning. Basically, all we've got to do is turn a piece of wood, starting with 4 billets. We'll take those 4 billets, and we'll turn what's going to become, anyway, the inside shape first. So we'll turn these inside out here so we can kind of take a look at this thing. But we're going to take the billets, we're going to glue them together, we're going to turn what's going to be the inside of the object, then we're going to bust it apart, turn them inside out, you guessed it, and lo and behold, hopefully we've got the shape or whatever that we actually need. So that's inside-out turning. Any questions? All right, let's hit the road. All right, good. Okay, let's back up to the beginning then, and we'll start. And we'll start with the selection of the wood. It's critically important when you do this to have an objective when you start out. And I say that because if you want to hide the joints in your piece, then you want to go with the darker woods. If that's not an issue, then the lighter colored woods are fine. We're going to be talking about this one that I've got the inside turned on, and just as an example here, this piece of figured maple, the joints are really going to show up on this. So they're going to be extremely visible when we get this thing turned because the grain doesn't line up. Now, to that end, then, if we were really, really worried about the joints, then the piece of wood that we would use to start with might be a piece of 16-quarter in this case. I actually came by this piece of cherry, and I would have actually had this made into a piece if I'd gotten it a little bit earlier, but it's going to be pretty easy for me to quarter this and then mill it up, and we'll turn it inside out. And then for the final assembly, put it back the way it is right now. And I'm kind of thinking from past experience that that's really going to hide those joints pretty nicely. But typically for inside out turning, we're going to start, as I say, with 4 pieces of wood. And for this particular project, the wine bottle, 8-quarter stock works really well. And so usually I'll just take a piece of wood. I do try to get the wood for color. I like to have a nice plank that's about 8 inches wide so I can rip it up and get the wood to all at least be the same color, even though I'm going to end up with less of a grain match. When we do this, though, the machining of the wood, the getting it square, is probably the most difficult and most important part of this whole process, because of the fact that we're going to be gluing these things up and then we're going to be turning them inside out. Just getting things square and the same size is critically important. And the way I typically do it is as I'm sure you woodworkers do, I joint 2 faces, adjacent faces, and then run it through the planer. And you can see that, you know, I forget where I am half the time, so I'm constantly, every time that thing comes past the jointer or I do a surface, I always mark it. So I can remember how I'm going here. But that's a number one probably thing right out of the blocks that you've got to do to make this work for you here. And then what we're going to do, and I've already got these messed up here, is once you get your pieces milled, the next step in the process is to put them together and try to get the grain that you want oriented nicely. And you'll have varying success with this. Sometimes the grain will look like it's going to blend pretty nicely. Other times, not so much. But we try to do the best we can in getting those pieces together. And then, obviously, we want to mark those so we know where we're at. Now, the process that I use to keep these oriented in the right direction is I always work clockwise as I'm looking at the pieces, and I mark them. And actually, the marks that I have on here right now, you'll see I have 2 squares basically, if I can get these things held together. And what that tells me is that that's the second glue up. So that's the final assembly that I want. So basically what I've done here is I've oriented these pieces to get the grain pattern that I think is going to work the best. And then I've marked these, and I've used a double square going around there. And then I mark them 1, 2, 3, 4 around, and I even use a little arrow to tell me that I'm all headed in the right direction here. Now, when I reverse these, when I turn these inside out, then I'll go ahead for my own purposes and trying to keep these oriented in the right direction. Then I'll make that same marking and identification, but this time I'll mark it with the 1 line. So I'll just put a single square around here, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and label this one number 1 because it corresponds up here. And then I'll just put a little arrow there that points, okay, let's go over to number 2, to 3, and we'll keep our arrows going right around here. It's important, you know, these pieces get mixed up every once in a while. You need to know how you want that orientation. And for me, it's really important not to say that I've ever messed them up, but just every once in a while, you know, things get a little out of sorts here on the bench. Now comes one of probably the biggest places where you can vary what you do. Like any other type of turning, you go on the internet, you know, as we all do, and watch YouTube videos and so forth and so on. There are just so many ways to do just about anything. And inside out turning definitely is not any different. But what I'm talking about is how we're going to hold these pieces together so that we can now turn what's going to be the inside here. Now, the way that I use is, in my way of thinking, probably the safest way. And I use a paper joint. I glue these together with newspaper in between, and then when I get this all turned and finished, like this one here is, for example, we can see the paper joints in here. As a matter of fact, they've started a little bit to come apart here, but that's okay. I know it's going to hold. But now I can break these apart and we'll all be happy. But there are many, many other ways you can do it. And I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. For example, there are some people that would make their blanks a little bit longer and use screws to hold it together. Other people will use a hose clamp and clamp these pieces right together. They usually tell you if you use a hose clamp, use a little electrical tape over the hose clamp, because that gets a little tricky with it flying around. And then there are some people who will glue it. Just put a tab of glue here, again, making the blanket a little bit longer than what you need. And then when you break it apart, you know, that's going to be turned inside out, so you're not hurting any of the surface on the inside. But that said, one of the things that I found with using some of these other methodologies that just hold the ends together, the biggest thing was when you turn it, you end up getting some chips sometimes because the pieces where you're turning aren't held right tight together. You get a little gap in there, so you get a little bit of breaking away sometimes of the grain. Sometimes it'll just plain be a chip where it's on the back side of the turning process, and it just hasn't worked. I guess probably secondly, because I was, when I was doing this, a lot showing a class of students, I wanted to pretty much be sure that everything was going to stay together also. And so for that reason, I'm going to glue these all together here, and we're going to do it that way. Now, that said, in some of the development of this, we talk a little bit about what is the turning that we're actually going to have to do. And in some cases, it's a little more difficult to see what that's going to look like. And I'll use this one as an example. When we go ahead and get this thing all ready to turn, and we've got our block all glued up here, that was good. So now we've got to turn. What's the shape, size, this, that, and the other thing that we need to turn in here? My suggestion for people is, first thing out, if you've never done this before, try something very, very simple, something that's just going to have maybe a standard opening to it, maybe something like this, for example. This is a little vase that I made, but something with an oval window here, that's quite easy to do. That shape, we can kind of see from half of this, is going to be not too bad to actually do. But when we get into shapes like this, it gets in a little bit of a mind game. This result looks like this. This is the sample of that. Now, one way that you can tell what your turning is going to look like is simply to put a straight edge or a flat surface right against the flat surface here. That's half of your cutout right there. That's actually what you're going to get, and that's the way you can tell it. The most difficult part of doing this wine glass, for example, was the stem, because when you're turning it, you've got whatever size you want the stem to that wine glass to be. In this particular case, we want this obviously to be half of that. So when we're turning our squares down, we're going to turn that section to a round. We've got to cut it right there. When we hit the round so that it's just as big a round as we can possibly get, that's where we have to really start worrying about the size of that stem there when we're turning. Now, the reason that I got this thing out there was because when I turn my prototypes like this, that's when I use the screws, because it's fastening it together, turning, taking it apart, turning it wrong side out, see how these things are going to actually come out there. And I found this method to be too good for that. So that's when I'll use the screws, and I use them in every direction you can imagine here, just to hold these pieces together. But when I do the real piece, not so much. This is the cutout for that little vase over there, and you can see the window that I like to call it right then and there. Okay, so, and again, held together with screws so that I can take it in and out and around and about. Okay, so I better turn this around so that I know where I'm headed here. When we get everything ready to go and we're ready to glue up, I tried several different methodologies in trying to glue this up and doing as good a glue up in terms of holding these pieces as I possibly could get. And that was definitely problematic. And then I came across this video by this lady by the name of Sue Harker. She's in England, and she has a video. It hasn't hit the top 10 list yet. Probably never will. But it is a good little video. And one of the things she had on there was a glue-up fixture. And so I ended up making one. And this is what it is. There's nothing too fantastic about it. But basically what I can do is I can take my two pieces that I want to glue up, in this case, and I can put them in this because I've taken particular care to make sure that everything here is perfectly square. Perfectly square. And even to the point where in the joints here, I put a little rabbet in there so that I don't want any dirt buildup. It's just extremely critical that we do this in such a way that we get that glued up the very best we possibly can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I think glue up a couple of these pieces. So I'm going to tip these out here, and I'm going to try to do the glue up right on here. Now, I use just regular Tite Bond, but any woodworking glue would work for this. Oop, don't throw it away here. One of the things that I did learn about doing paper joints is that in this whole glue up process, we want enough glue so that we're going to glue the paper there, but certainly we don't want to overdo it. I think that was one of the biggest things, because if we get too much glue on here, it's just going to come out as squeeze out anyway. And so I don't overdo it with the glue in this case. I used to, and then I would have glue literally all over the place. So I just put enough so that I've got the surface covered, but I'm not going to overdo it. And if you're down in the Keene area, the Keene Sentinel works great. Now, my little pieces there are a little bit bigger than what I wanted. But I'm going to put these right together, and I'll just fold these over. Now, some people, almost forgot the most important part. Wax paper. Plastic wrap also works. I have a piece of plastic up against the end here. But I set these right in here, and then I clamp it in 2 directions. First of all, to keep it the seam together, we'll use these. And then I'll use some clamps to clamp it in the other direction. I actually, my selection of clamps was actually such that I used these quick grip clamps because I know that they can be overridden by these larger Bessie type clamps here. In other words, if I don't have them right tight up against here, that'll bring them right in. And I've had pretty good luck using this particular application. Now, if you were to watch that video that I was talking about, she glues all four pieces together at once. I found that to be a total disaster. So I'm never in that much of a hurry. So I'll glue this up. It only takes, I usually wait about a half hour, and then I feel comfortable taking this apart and gluing them back together. So this would be glue up number 1. Holy smokes. We're falling apart here. Okay. Well, I guess that's okay. So at the end of that operation, when we take them out, this is what we're going to have. And then in the whole process of putting these pieces, is that working okay? In putting these pieces together, my secret weapon, you know, the good old piece of plywood with some 120 grit in this case, because what we're going to do now with this piece is we obviously need to glue these together. And I don't want to take any chances even with this. I want to make sure that I get that joint as good as I can. So I'll definitely give these a sand and make sure that I've got a pretty good joint there. Could run them by a jointer. I've had people say, well, why don't you just run it by the jointer one time? And you could. Again, you don't want to mess up your sizing here. What we're trying to avoid is that, and this would be the probably a perfect example of what we can run into, is that if we joint one piece more than the other piece, or one side, not both sides of the square, what's going to happen is when we turn this inside out and we put it together, these aren't going to be the same. So that's what's going to happen. Again, just talking from experience, having been there. And that just sort of follows us through the whole process. Every time we do something, if there's a chance for it to go off center or change that size, it's problematic for us. And so the next step, obviously, is to glue these two up. And that's why I say, you know, my process that I use is slow, but I'm getting paid by the hour. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
When you first take it out of your first glue up, I assume there's a little paper sticking out. Do you just sand that off, or do you cut that off with a razor blade or something?
I just take a really sharp chisel and just slide it right along.
Oh, okay. Being careful not to cut into the corner.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it looks like this when it comes out.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of paper on there, but I found a nice sharp chisel and just slide that along. And that's what I was saying, why I need this. There is just a ever so slight little difference there when they come out. This one's even better than that one was, but there's a little bit of difference, and that's why I give it a good sand. And again, just go with my paper joint there. Okay. So that's sort of the glue up, and we're going to end up with a blank that's going to look something like this. My thought, this is some poplar, and it was interesting to have the conversation about the dyes and all of that good stuff, because one of the thoughts I had in making one of these bottles was to use poplar, could have been maple or whatever, but when I get the bottle together, I'm going to dye the outside of it. I'll pass this one around, but several years ago I made this little inside-out turning for my wife. She was a teacher, and so I saw this. Actually, I got the same information. Mike Darlow's book, many of you may have this and whatever. I'll pass it around if you want to see it if you haven't seen it. But Mike presents a lot of different techniques, off-center turning and all sorts of different types of turning. And I got the idea from him of the apple. One of his projects that he did was actually an apple sitting on top of a stand that had like a little tree in it. And so I took that idea and I said, well, let's make it a little more interesting. So when we look inside the apple with the apple windows, let's put an apple on the inside of that. So what I was getting at, we can pass that book around if anybody's seen it or whatever. When I did this one, I wanted it to look more like a natural apple that you would bite into. So we got the red on the outside, and this is made out of maple finished clear on the inside after that first turning, and sort of gives more of that apple look. And we can pass that around if people want to see it if they haven't seen that before. So that's where I'm headed with this bottle here. I figured I would glue up some poplar. I'm going to put a finish on the turning when we get it, so it'll be clear or this color on the inside. Then when I get the bottle turned, I'll dye it. I actually noticed that a lot of wine bottles are colored. I found some blue ones and some green ones. So I said, we'll give that a shot and see if we can give it a go. Okay? Any questions at this point? You got us this far. Okay. Now, one of the other things that I learned early on as just kind of a little technique that I use, you'll notice that on the two ends, I've got a saw kerf in there. One of the problems that I had in the re-glue process, after I break these apart and I want to put them together, is that for the second glue up, not only do we have to get them lined up this way, but I was having trouble vertically. So what's going to happen here is when I do turn this inside out and I glue it together, I've got some little splines right here that I will put right in these little saw kerfs. And that's critically important for any time you have a window that has a flat surface on it. If it's rounded, like the vase, for example, if the bottom of the window is curved and it's off by a little bit of sandpaper, a little sanding in there takes care of that pretty nicely. But it's a pain right in the neck for any object that has a flat on the bottom. So in the second gluing process, we want to make sure that we can get those as good as we can. And even then, it's not an exacting science, mainly because it's very hard to get that surface that we're going to be turning absolutely flat and straight as it goes in. So that's just one of the little problem areas that we have there. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I've got this piece glued up. And now, when I turn these, my preference, we've got to remember that we've got glue joints here, which are mediocre at best, because we want to take them apart. I found that I like to use the steb center, both in the headstock and in the tailstock. The worst case scenario would be if you use a cone point center in the tailstock, because that wedge, I'll almost guarantee that in the turning process, it's going to separate those pieces on you. Same in the headstock here. And anything that has a solid point that's going to act as a wedge when it goes in there is or could be problematic here. So we'll move this right over here and see if we can't get this thing. Both of these centers are spring-loaded, so they get themselves right out of the way for us and should work nicely. It doesn't hurt to put a little insurance there. And, you know, this packing tape, I would not do this at home. But poor Peter can't get out of the way. Oh, that'll be no problem. But I do. And I have even turned. I mean, I would not suggest it very straight out of the box, but I have actually turned these. If I am trying to do a prototype, just using this as the holding device, it holds really, really well. They start to rattle, then you got to stop and you might want to stop and rethink what you're doing there. But yeah, that'll work fine. So I'll throw a piece on there just to keep us all on the same page there. We'll throw that around there. Good. And we can, it's up to you how you want to orient this piece. I like to work such that this will be the bottom of the bottle in this case, and this will be the top up here. And what I've done is I've determined that if I use one of these pieces, so if you have your prototype, if you take the prototype apart, lay it down on a bench, and just copy this profile right here, which is half your window. And that's what I've done. I've got my little cardboard paper template here, and that's how I actually came about getting my template. Okay, very, very simple thing to do. And when I'm turning here, I can just hold that right on a seam, and that will give me the proper amount. The basic design that they tell you in all of the articles and everything, that when we turn this, we want to make sure that we leave at least 60% of our size here, so that when we do turn it inside out, you know, we've got enough for the actual windows to form and the little webs in between them. Actually, I'm going through this whole process here and returning it. There are even some people that are doing it inside out turning, but they do it with a couple of different glue ups. In other words, what they do is they would turn the wine bottle shape first. So put it together the way you want it, turn the outside, and then turn that inside out, turn the inside shape to match the outside shape, and then break that apart, turn it around, and glue it back together for the final assembly. I don't know. You know, I've never tried that, but usually if you see these, particularly the Christmas ornaments that have, people go crazy with that outside shape and the inside shape matches it. That's one way that they actually do those. Okay, so this is going to be the bottom of my bottle. I've also determined on this piece that this here will give me enough down on the bottom so that I'll have enough scrap there. So in other words, if I put this right on here, and I'm actually going to give myself about an extra ½ inch because I know I've got extra length here. This window that I'm going to be turning is going to be right in there. Now, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so my whole designs are based on my wife's drinking problem. Don't tell her I said that. Thanks very much. But no, I grabbed, what size do I want this whole thing to be? What size workup do I need and all that stuff. And so, I'd see her emptying a bottle of wine or something. No, not really. But I went to everybody's house, and if they had a wine bottle there, I would gather it up so that I would just get the general basic idea. I did find that most wine bottles are all the same length, so the same height, I should say. So, that was a revelation, I guess. But anyway, so here's our window, and I'm just going to mark that square so we can see it, and we should be in good shape. From here, it's just basic turning. I want to turn to get that shape. So we'll start with a spindle roughing gouge. Let's just do a little check here, see how we're doing, and give Bertha a try here. So we'll just, a little high for me, we'll just turn this right down to a round. The turning of these is actually quite straightforward and actually not difficult at all. Now, you can get yourself into some difficult problems. For example, on the wine glass window, I found that one of the problem areas that I was having was down in there, the base of the goblet itself. That was a little tricky, but all in a day's work here. As I said, the turning is not difficult. On your first project, I think, at least for me, one of the first things that I did was I said, well, I want this to be my window, so I think I'm there. And of course, that's not true. It's got to be this shape beyond the flat. So you turn a lot more than you actually think you might. And I'm just getting this sort of roughed out here. And I'm going to use a spindle gouge. You could use a spindle gouge. You could use a skew, whatever you feel comfortable with to come on now, to form that. And this is the most difficult part of the turning anyway. Remember I talked about this floor right here, this base. When we turn this thing inside out, what's going to happen here is that these pieces are going to come together in this orientation, and this is what I was talking about, of getting that base really, really flat right there. This one in particular is quite rounded. I didn't do a good job of getting that really flat. And a little trick that I learned, where I put this is really totally where I actually set it. In other words, I've got some flexibility there. So what I actually do is start when I'm about 1/8 of an inch from where I know I want to be, start trying to get that thing square. And then when I get it square, if I'm on the line, great. If I'm a 1/16 off the line, one way or the other. I don't care if it's this way or that way. But you notice that when I put this on here, this is what I needed for the bottom of my piece. I actually added a little bit. And one of the reasons I did it was from experience, saying that'll give us a little bit of leeway here when it comes to design here. So I'm going to just line this right up as best I can. And come right in there. And like I said, if you're a skew type person, that's good too. Anything works here. And there's all sorts of little things you find. For example, one of the things that I do in these is come down in here and make these nice and square. But obviously, if you leave a little bit of a cove there, it's just going to make these a little rounded. So you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of what you actually need to do here. We'll bring this down here. Now these bottles, because I can't talk and turn at the same time, these bottles tend to be tremendously top heavy because we've got the base here and we've got the window, but then we have all of this volume up in here. So one of the things that I do is try to lessen this, and I lessen that by actually turning a little bit of this off. And I've found that that really helps with the overall balance of the piece when we're going to put it together. So you notice that once we get this turned here, this turning that's done up here is simply so that when I turn this thing inside out, this is a weight reduction thing. And you can play around with it here, there, everywhere to get this right. Now, the other thing that I do as I'm turning here, we'll do it in a second. I should probably put this way so you can see where we're headed here with this little project. You notice that there's a little notch taken out of here. The reason for that is when I turn that inside out, that's going to be the hole so I can put a tenon on the end of the wine glass and epoxy that right in there. So that's what that little divot right there is. And kind of shooting ahead a little bit, but when I actually do that, I'll measure that and put it together, and I've got a wine glass here that's ready to go into actually this one. But I'll wait on that tenon until I find out what kind of a mess up I did down here. I've got plenty of space there, but some of them are 3/8, some of them are 1/2 inch. Doesn't matter. When I get this all together, I'll measure that, and then I'll make that tenon accordingly. Because it's not critical, but one of the things, and you'll see it when we do the second turn there, it's really cool just from your standpoint, the turner standpoint, I think, when you get this all together with the wine glass inside, you put it between centers, and even the wine glass turns nice and symmetrical as it goes across. And so that's basically where I'm shooting at. And I don't have to worry about, is it on center or whatever. We'll just plain center it there. So getting back here, we've got a little bit further to go, which we can do. And I like using the template, as I said, because I'm about maybe a 1/16 of an inch away. I didn't check. I got talking and I was thinking about where I was headed here. But we do want to check that. That's not really too bad out at the end. But here again, if I were to glue this together right now and leave it that way, now I've got this hump down in here that I definitely need to get rid of. Really nice out at the outside edge here. So I'm going to leave that and hope that I can just kind of bring that in a little bit to flatten that surface out. Again, only because I know this is going to be my biggest pain in the neck. Let's just try that. I'd like to see if I could get that. I'm putting in for a raise. Who do I see? Is the treasurer here? Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, I can't wait. Okay, now what I'm going to do is turn a little bit of this away. Now, the only thing that, if we're going to do anything like this where we're reducing weight or we're doing any type of turning that we don't want to show, the one thing that you want to be careful of is you leave yourself enough space here. You know, we don't want to go out there, obviously, and I'll try to get that down within, so that maybe that's like 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch or something. But that should be nicely. I think in all the bottles that I've made, I've never got that. I've never turned through one. I've come awful close every once in a while, but we're good. We're at about, maybe 1/2, 5/8 of an inch right there now. So we want to leave that surface right there and go back to our original setup here. And we need to go up this way a little bit further, mainly because of the setup. You know, my line here, I'm moving everything up just a little bit, and we need to go down about 1/8 of an inch or so. Whoop, that's never happened to you guys, does it? That's the first time in my life that's ever happened. You believe that? I'll tell you another one. We'll just kind of bring that right across. And we'll try to get rid of that little mess up right there. There we go. And of course, this surface here is going to determine the sides, obviously, of our window. So we could have it tapered, we can have it straight. You do have quite a bit of design flexibility in a sense there. And I'm going to try to get that just as flat as I can going across there. Take a little bit more off the bottom here. And we'll bring that right up. Let's see how we're doing. I don't think it's too bad. That's close enough. I could take this up a little bit. There's nothing sacred about this, but you know, for me, I'm using a 4-inch wine goblet when I make those up. And usually what I do is I'll turn a bunch of those. So I need to be a little bit cognizant, but I could come up this way a little bit. We might as well do it. We almost messed it up once, so I might as well try it again. Now, one of the other problem areas, actually, for me anyway, is we talked about the bottom of the window. In a window like this, it's actually the top that we want to be cognizant of also. If you want it to be round, which is what I'm shooting for, I need to make sure that this obviously is more of a half circle. I don't want it to be oval, because what will happen is when I turn it around, I'm going to get a pointed window. So this area right in here is quite critical. And I've got to come in there a little bit more. I need to go a little bit straighter, actually. I guess that's the best way to explain it. And then I can put that curve in there. Otherwise, as I said, I'm going to get a window and it's going to come up a little bit too pointed. The good news is that when you turn these, this edge right here is very, very thin. It's knife-like, actually. As a matter of fact, when we do that second turn, it may chip out on us a little bit. But in terms of the window shape, particularly on the top here and the way that this is turned away here, if that does come out a little pointed, a little sandpaper wrapped around a 1-inch dowel, straighten that right out pretty good. So we'll try to get that turned just a little bit better. I don't want it to get too flat, but I do want to bring it right in there. There, that's a better. That's a better shape for me. And as I'm looking this from back a ways, I think I'm a little big right in here. So I just want to take that down a little bit. Now we're going to just sand that up. I mean, that's not rocket science. I don't want to do a bunch of sanding in here. But I will say that one of the things that I came up with to help me with the squareness of the bottom, get it as absolutely square as we can, I just took actually it was one of the blocks that I was using for another one of these bottles, and put some sandpaper on it so that I can lay this on here and just bring this right in, sand that thing perfectly square. Works slick to square that surface right up there. So as I said, we'll just sand this and get it all sanded up and then finish it with whatever type of finish we want. So there's several ways we can approach this. We could dye the inside, which is actually what I did with this bottle. This is dyed with, I believe this is a purple dye that I used on the inside of this one. I knew it was either blue or purple, but I couldn't remember. And then finish the outside clear, or this one is headed in the direction of I'm going to finish this clear, and I'm going to dye the bottle once I get it all turned. But that's that. So what we're going to have when we get done with that part of the operation, hopefully is going to look something like this. This is obviously maple. It's got about 4 coats of Formby's tongue oil finish. I just love that stuff. This actually has a pretty good sheen to it. Typically, I would buff this out with 4-aught steel wool and maybe give it a coat of wax. This actually is right from the applicator. And again, I use paper towel, as Peter mentioned in his application. The reason I use paper towel is more because of the lint. I found it works really, really well. My preference, too, the hardware store sells these shop towels. They're blue. 1 square of that, when I put a finish on, I only use a little 2.5 by 2.5 inch square anyway. I don't want to use half a sheet of paper towel and just have the finish wick up in there anyway. So I use a little square and put it on there, and I found those to be pretty good in terms of having lint and stuff in them. Really, this here just has I haven't buffed this or anything yet either, and it's got about the same 4 coats of finish on it. Always like challenge. I had to laugh when I actually held this up here. You know, not kind of thinking ahead with these little captured rings. I was having a heck of a time. You know, I'm not even thinking. I put a coat of finish on the goblet. That's fun. But then I try to hold the ring, put the finish on it, and then let it sit like this. And I come down the next day, and of course the ring is stuck right to the base. So I put up with that for several times. And then I happened to look down on the bench. There was a piece of 2x4 there. And so I just took 2 finish nails and put them in the end of the piece of 2x4 to lift it up like this. I said, I should have done that 5 years ago. But anyway, it works pretty nicely. So once we're all set, it's time for turning session number 2 here. And so what we're going to do, here it is right here, is we're just simply going to put this chisel, and it doesn't even have to be a sharp one, right in that glue joint. A little tap, and that baby pops right apart. And if it doesn't, then we can just turn it over and come in from the other side and do the same thing. And oh my goodness, look at that. It's always amazing. The college students always like the first revelation they had is when you take this apart, the print from one side is here and the print on the other side. Okay, so taking a second just to recap where we were. We had our turn piece here. Let me just get these back to where they were. We had a piece that we turned. This one has been finished. And then we kind of stand it up here. We'll take a chisel and bust it apart this way and this way so that we end up with our 4 pieces separated out. And now the process very simply is going to be to take and turn these, as it says, inside out. And now we're going to develop the windows that we talked about before and that we have here. They're going to show up, and we see how well we actually made out. Now, what we see happening here is that we can tell how well we did on squaring our piece up when we're actually turning it. And to be perfectly honest, this one here, in the sanding process, as happens a lot, I tend to round that just a little bit, and that actually happened here. It's very, very hard to get a flat surface on these pieces when we put them together. So, given that, it's back to the glue table. Here it's going to be critical if we take 2 pieces, which have got to be put together here. We're going to do it, or I would do it, in a 2-step process, whereby we would do 2 pieces, glue those together, then we'll take the 2 halves and we'll actually put them together. Now, those splines that I cut in here are going to be extremely useful. That is, if I could find them. I'll take out a couple more. But I have a little container here. Oh, there they are, right there. And when we glue this together, I'd use the same gluing format, but this time, just to help us out a little bit, we'll drop a spline in, and I put 2 splines. I put a spline here and a spline in the bottom also, so that when I lay this in the gluing fixture, I'm still going to use the clamps to glue them, to hold them this way, to get them aligned, and obviously the glue joint. And a big part of this will be to sand these joints. Even though this looks not bad, I would still go back to my sanding board here and give those surfaces that I'm going to put together a nice sand, and to make sure that they fit together. And woodworkers know that when we get these things fitting really good, it's almost like they're magnetic. They'll just kind of hold each other together. Literally amazing. But that's what we're actually going to want so that we hide these joints. And again, I know that when I put these together And after I turn it, I would expect that I am going to get some grain differentiation. We are going to see that seam, but in this particular case, it's going to show off the fact that it's got a very dramatic grain to it. In the process of gluing this together, when we do the, after we get 2 together and 2 together, we're going to have to put that wine glass in the middle here. And that's why when we get these things together, at this point, I would take and put them together dry, measure that, looks like about a 1/2 inch, but I would still test it, and then having turned the wine glass here, I'll take and make this tenon so it just fits nice and snug in there and keeps everything aligned very, very nicely. But that's going to be put in that gluing process. So, as I said, same fixture, everything with the gluing, put that little rascal right together. So here we are. It didn't take long, did it? Whip that little baby right together. So we've got our little wine glass inside here. This one does have the captive ring on it. So one of the first things I'm going to do when I get this mounted on the lathe is tape that ring so it just behaves itself nicely in there. But we're in pretty good stead. And again, you know, the fact of these splines, I just can't emphasize enough in this particular project because of this base here. Those are quite critical. And I just have marked my centers here. And now the fun part, because we're going to see the fruits of our labor here when we actually turn this thing on. So we'll just turn it on and see how we're doing here. And as I said, it's nice to just kind of look in there and see how that wine glass just kind of stays nice and even here. The little ring there, it's doing its thing, but I guess that's why when I first started turning these, I figured that was an indicator of lathe speed. If you threw the ring off center, that's good. That's a good speed. But what I'm going to do here is I'll just take that little ring, only because I actually had one ring break on me when it was flopping around there a little bit. So what I do is I usually just tape the ring to the goblet, and that'll just keep it out of my way while I'm doing the actual turning here. And, you know, what we're going to see, too, is that as we turn it down, we're just going to take a spindle gouge, we're going to get this thing down to a cylinder. As we start turning it down, you get the answer to the question, did I leave enough wood? We'll find out in just a second. I guess that's where we're headed with that little part of the process here. Okay. And what I will actually do after I just wanted to, if I back up just a little bit, you know, I mentioned how this may not be absolutely perfect. I use little, I call them sanding sticks, basically just pieces of kindling, but a flat surface, and glue with the 77 spray adhesive, a little piece of sandpaper to it. And I do spend some time with these, trying to get these evened up here, because very rarely do they come out absolutely perfect. So this time we've got regular glue joints, so that's definitely a good thing. If it comes apart at this stage, I definitely messed up. Okay. So we'll just make sure everything's nice and snugged up here and see if we can give this a go. kind of interesting to hear the different tones when and that will become even more evident as we go down here. Actually, at this point in the turning process anyway, I can tell that we've got plenty of wood there because obviously I can see right down through there. Maybe you can too. You can see the thickness of the wood there. And even though we're still out at the outer edges of our turning here, we've got enough. Famous last words. We'll just try to go along there. Obviously, it's not going to, doesn't matter up here at the top. Whoops, excuse me just a second here. We're losing audio. Here we go. And video. I can't see. There we go. We're good. Now, let's just stop this and take a look and see how we're progressing along. Oh, yeah. So we're doing okay. And here again, you know, the whole issue, I was talking to some people about the accuracy of the turning and so forth and so on. And when I turned this one here, one of the things that actually happened when I was turning it is I saw that I wasn't accurate with the turning or centering, I should say, of this one. Even though I had done everything that I could to get the pieces square, get the pieces the same size. In the whole process, where I messed up was when I located that center. When I actually used the scratch awl to come into that center, I let the grain take over there a little bit. That little bit of offset translates up here to not coming together. Now, what that'll do on a wine bottle like this is if we weren't centered, as we look at the sides of our window, it wouldn't be the same all the way around. And this one came out pretty good. Okay, it's not too bad. When you get into finer work, like these ornaments here that I turned, again, inside out. Inside out turning lends itself to Christmas ornaments very, very nicely. Because, as you know, when we're turning Christmas ornaments, one of the things that we're looking for is the weight. I've designed tons of Christmas ornaments that you put on the tree and takes the whole tree branch right down because it's like a rock. And so this notion of inside-out turning, it's just tremendous. But again, what happens with these, and again, speaking from experience, these little webs that are left, you've got a 1/4-inch one over here and a 3/8 one next to it, really shows up. So you try to get them as accurate as you possibly can here. And this was kind of cool because I tried to use a couple of different kinds of wood just to show off. And you know, a lot of people look at it and they say, you know, how'd you put that together? You know, well, take my class. No, not really. Okay, so let's get this down to the size of our bottle. It's a nice exercise in tool control, holding that, in this case, the gouge. And it's very nice. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've got a nice little, maybe about a 1/16 lighter colored band that I can see that says you got to go down a little bit more before you actually go to wood. Now, in turning this project, my final diameter is not really critical because all that's going to happen as I turn this down, and then now I need to turn this flat down. So that little margin, I call it, told me that I still had a little bit left here, but we're going down. And then even if I turn a little bit too much on this, all it's going to do is open those windows up a little bit. So this one is, you know, the hard part's over, as they say. So we can turn this right down. And as I said, my goal on this one, if this one should make it that far, is to, I plan to dye this bottle probably blue. That would be my little chips are falling off of there, and they're getting in the way here. Okay, we've got a little bit further to go, but nice to check it out. And a little bit of chipping on the backside here, which would just about any kind of wood, you're going to experience that. But you wouldn't leave that as a sharp razor edge anyway, so that will come right off there very nicely. But we're getting there. Just slow and easy. Kind of the name of the game here. Not quite there yet. Almost. I'm going to move my tool rest in a little closer here and see if we can get that right down. Nice to practice on a bigger project like this one because, you know, you don't get too much flex. Some. But some, like the Christmas ornaments, that gets tricky sometimes because those webs get really, really small. Okay. Got just a little bit here. We could turn that. It looks like I'm not as centered as I thought I was. Ooh, it feels good on this end. All right, we did it. Oh, not quite. We'll get that. I don't want to go through. That's the only thing, and I don't think that's a major issue anyway. Just make sure we're snug here. So now we're into, obviously, the whole notion of a shaping process. And at this point, what I usually do is I'm going to form a tenon on here because my final turning will be done held in a 4-jaw chuck. And what that does is it allows me to get this top finished right down and actually at the end just be turning it very, very dubiously to finish up this outside, of the top, I should say, of the top of the top here. And one of the things I was noticing as I was turning this, and I talked about earlier, for some reason right there, even though this is really, really a fairly good joint down here, I noticed that I'm off by, if I had to measure it, probably a 30-second, maybe a strong 30-second. But again, I would just take a piece of dowel and just kind of round that a little much. It's a little more pointy than I actually would like to see it anyway. So we'll take, I think, the parting tool here and see if we can grab this. It was kind of interesting. A couple people were talking about the centers that I'm using here. Ends up, this is a Sorby stab center. Is the actual center here. I thought it came from Penn State, but I guess it didn't. But I think the drive spur did. Oh, we got a ways to go. That's good. Okay, I think I'm going to stop and remount that in the chuck for the final turning there. And the reason I would do it now, I don't have to put the chuck on now, but that'll give me any little bit if I need to true it up at all, that will do it. It's amazingly. Having turned a lot of these out of hardwood, this is the first one I remember anyway, turning out of poplar. Yeah, go ahead. That's extremely light compared to, it's actually more in tune to where I wanted to be. One of the letdowns that I had when I started doing the first of these, they were made from the Purple Heart. I picked the thing up afterwards. And, holy smoke, this thing is, heavy. Weighs a little bit more than what I wanted it to. Now, I thought, oh, there it is right there behind the glue bottle. There it goes. Scared me. I didn't think it was going to go on there. There we go. And we should be ready to go. So we're about ready to finish that up. And as I said, what I do is I just look for a shape that I want to do. This was the original one that I turned, and that shows up from the Purple Heart type bottle, making kind of an abrupt shoulder there. My thinking was that I had the windows. In retrospect, I probably could have brought this down a little bit more, and that again would have helped with that weight. But I think relieving that inside there also helps just a little bit. And then, of course, a bottle like this, more trying to get that shape. But I guess bottom line is I don't try to reinvent the wheel. The shapes are here. So basically all I'm going to do is try to duplicate them in any way, shape, or form that I possibly, come on guys, can. Okay. Good, thank you. Okay.
Charlie, this is a question.
Okay, as long as it's simple.
Oh yeah, simple. You don't have to use a steady grist at all when you get out to that end? No. I've never had that be any issue. Of course you could put it right up here, get yourself a shoulder and get that held in there, but no, it hasn't been too much of an issue. Well, let's see how we're turning here. Not very good. Probably looks like the fact that the adapter that I've got or something there, that's out of wonkus just a little bit. Not much, but it doesn't take much to throw this off. So we'll just true everything up. Could have been the shoulder that I created, but it's never that. Yeah, it is. Something is a little bit out of wonkus here. I don't know what it actually is. Okay. So we can take, I just want to delineate that bottom. Actually, let me go by my, good. That worked out pretty well. My little template works pretty well. I mean, that's worked in the past, so why not? So we'll make that the bottom of our bottle here. And I don't want to go too small because I am going to have to use that for stability when we get up top here. But we'll just round this down around a little bit, just again, just to get our shape. And I would like to move this tool rest up just a little bit. Okay. And I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, so we'll get this somewhat the same size. One thing, obviously, about this poplar is that, boy, it is stringy. Give this baby a little more speed here. Now we just got to, I call it working to the finesse, but we need to develop this shape. And I sort of in my own mind had worked out this shape. I like the shape of the bottle there that I was actually going by, and I try to get in as much detail as I possibly can here. So what we'll do up at the top is we'll sort of give it some type of a little look like you'd find on any wine bottle here. In this case, the easiest one is just to leave it a little high there and make it look like a wine bottle that has that kind of a top on it. And while I'm here, I'll talk about this this gold finish that I use up here. That's nothing more than just regular Home Depot Rust-Oleum spray. A couple of things. I do a couple things with that. First of all, what that does is sometimes I will even cut this thing off and actually do that end there while I've got it held in the chuck. But what I was going to say, that gold paint, if you paint it this way, runs right down, even masking tape. And so I bought some frog tape, a little bit better than the blue tape. But finally, one day I said, well, stupid, why don't you spray it this way? And lo and behold, you know, you get a little wicking. I mean, if you look, you can see there's still a little teeny bit of wicking, but certainly not enough. And I use gold, I use the silver, any of those things. Again, just trying to make it look as realistic as we can there. And I was going to show from the, what did I do with the little, oh, this one here. Sometimes what I'll do is I said, well, you know, not all of these wine bottles are full. Maybe what we should do is put a cork in that. And so we can do that too. And again, from here, we're just going to drill that, and you all would know the routine from there. Take a little piece of cherry. It does give you a nice opportunity to put the year, the vintage, on the bottle, and that adds. And I do that to the little Christmas ornaments here because I do want to, indicate what the year was and all of that stuff. But the rest, basically, we'll finish turning this neck here, and then the sanding process. And I found that if you use the sandpaper, I thought I brought a whole sheet. Yeah, I did. It's over here. What I do with this is if you hold this flat and really hold it taut, you can do most of the sanding on these webs here without having to worry too much about it. And, I think a secondary benefit of doing that, it keeps everything flat and flowing in the same direction. Whereas, at first I said, well, I'm not going to sand that. I know, from previous experience on things that these are all going to have to be sanded out individually. And you can do that, but every once in a while you sand one a little more than the other, or there's a little divot in it, and that would make a difference. We want to check a whole bunch of things. Like one of the things that I think I'm seeing, but I'm not positive that I'm seeing. Oh, what an eye. Can you see that I'm thicker here than I am here? So what I've got to do is go back there. We've got to bring that down. But that's one of the finer details. I mean, we can do that. And then what I will do with this one, because it's going to be dyed, what I do with projects like that, like I did with the apple, is I will take this tenon here right down as small as I dare to and still have it turning on the lathe. And I'll dye this thing. But what I'll end up with is that little dot, however big that is, anywhere from a ½ inch down, left on the bottom. It's a perfect place to make a little button. Just put it right over the bottom. And you planned it that way, right? You could dye it and try to blend it in, but I will do all the finishing. One of my basic finishing philosophies for most of my pieces, a bowl or a hollow vessel or whatever, I'm basically lazy. So I like to finish right on the lathe. I do all of my finishing. If I'm turning a bowl, first of all, I put it on a waste block, and that's how I actually turn them, either on a faceplate or I'll turn a tenon on the waste block. But I will do 100% of the turning right down through to if I want to put a final wax on it, if I want to buff it, it will be done with that waste block on the bottom. And then I treat the bottom, whatever that happens to be, whether it be in the case of a bowl, the base of the bowl, or in the case here, the little tenon that's left, I'll treat that as a separate entity. Like for example, in bowl turning, I always like to leave a little foot on the majority of the pieces I do. One of the reasons for that, I give people all this stuff about, the bowl shape is going to be coming down. It's going to elevate it off the table. And, I try to talk like my hair's down to my waist, like I really know what I'm talking about. Fact of the matter is, I do it so that I can finish the whole bowl, and then I have a flat entity at the bottom, the base, to put on my reversing chuck and do whatever I want to on the bottom, and then finish it. So anyway, but that's how I will go about finishing this. Now, I can go ahead and finish this and turn it down, but I feel like probably everybody knows basically what's got to happen from here to go to this entity here. So you can see we've got just a little bit of finishing up to make this look right. I'll keep the length. I've got about maybe a half, 3/4 of an inch here on the top, which is just what I wanted, and we're good to go. And then this will be finished also with the same probably finish. I'll probably dye this, and then probably the Formby's finish on the outside of that. I did want to mention, anyway, this piece, because given the process, and I hope my goal was to show the process. The product is nice, and that's cool, but it's the process. If you basically know the step-by-step process and what could go wrong with it. I mean, that's what I tried to do, only because I've done it, and it's messed up. But once you know basically the technique, number one, and then what the issues are in trying to get a piece like this turned, number one, I say right off the bat, for example, is how square you need to get the pieces when you're going, and then that whole glue-up accuracy and all of that. But then it just explodes with what you can do. And you go online, and I always like doing a Google search, because about the second or third entry is usually images of, and you just look down through there, and they're doing everything you can possibly imagine using inside-out turning. And the vast majority of them, if you just know these few techniques, you're good. And I say that because it was either 1 or 2 years ago, the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen came out, and when they do a lot of their exhibits, they have to have a theme to them. And this theme happened to be circles, squares, and triangles was the theme. And I happened to actually be making a few of these bottles at the time, and I said, I know how to do that. And it ended up being probably one of the more difficult. It's right up there with that wine glass in terms of trying to get a square window. Because in this particular case, what I found is you get in the rough turning stage, you got the height here. So you got your two square shoulders coming down. Now you're going for depth. And that depth obviously is going to be 1/2 the height and all of that good stuff. But then when you turn it, it goes down. And now you've got a rectangle. And so I've got a couple of 3 or 4 of these hanging around the shop with rectangular openings. But it was still a lot of fun. It was just a challenge. And, when you're given a theme like that, it's just one more thing where when you put your old thinking cap on and you say, what am I going to do? How am I going to, pull this off? The inside-out turning was the answer for me anyway, only because usually whatever their exhibits are, I try to make it some type of a turning, and this is what I ended up with here. Okay. Are there any questions or anything that I can answer? Has anybody got questions? Make them simple, but still, you can ask questions.
When you were turning past the windows, what was your speed, roughly?
875. Okay. Now that, speed in this case is fast, but I actually probably could have turned faster. I think speed in wood turning is quite a topic, because I turn on a one-way and they don't have a tachometer on it. So everybody's always asking me, how fast you turn? I don't know. In general, I will say that because of my teaching, I'm basically a chicken. Some people turn just put it on screen. I remember first AAW symposium that I went to, Richard Raffin was going to turn one of his boxes. Auditorium, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I was way in the back. Thank God, actually. But he had a little piece of ebony. It was probably like maybe 2 inches square, maybe 3 inches long. So he just, as you know, we can put that square piece right in our 4-jaw chuck and start turning away. Well, of course, he's blabbing away as we all do when we get up front like this. And he took his gouge and touched that piece. Well, it just went right across the whole auditorium. And I was standing. Actually, it did me good because I said, I've done that. So it's good to know that these world-famous turners have the same thing. But that thing was really spinning fast. And I tend to turn a little slower than a lot of people do. I know that, you get nice finish and all of that stuff the faster you go. But as I said, I'm basically a chicken, even when I'm in my shop by myself. So I do turn slow. But anyway, any other questions or anything I can answer? Wow. Hey, thank you guys very much for showing up.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Perfect.